All right, hello and welcome everyone. It is Tuesday, October 13th. We have made it halfway through the month so far. You have turned in your week 2 assignments on Sunday, and you have gone through your first round of revisions. So we are certainly up to our full pace and kind of going to ride this setup or the order of all of the assignments and the flow for the rest of the weeks through the end of the month. So we have a new game to talk about this week. And actually, in line with all of that information, this is going to be our third and final game, and the reason for that is we have one more round of revision. Well, you'll have week 2 revisions, and then you will have so this is week 3. You're going to have week 2 revisions in week 3, and you're going to have week 3 revisions in week 4. But we have no brand new game composition next week at the beginning of week 4 because you don't have a week 5 to do revisions there. So we are going to round everything out, wrap everything up in the last week. And so this is this culminates all of our ideas into the final format of our game composition this week. So one of our main tasks to start out with is we are going to be discussing your new game, your new week's assignments, the game composition, the production technique, and the technical assignment. We will start out with those, and then just like last Tuesday, we will go back to the previous week. We'll go back to week 2 and discuss all of those assignments. So let's see. On Friday, you turned in your first round of revisions. So you have you made changes and updates to your week 1 assignments. And on Thursday and Friday, there was a revision assignment open available for that. And I have received all of those. And then on Sunday, you had all of your week 2 assignments due. So that is mainly your Angry Bots composition, but also the chiptune assignments and the sound effects for 2D platformer. So now you have all of your sound effects and music completed for your first game for 2D platformer, and we're going to do that through the rest of the month. Your technical assignment for this week is going to be going back and doing all of the sound effects for Angry Bots, which is lots of fun because it's robots and explosions and some interesting effects overall. So we will certainly get into that. So that puts everything back into my court. You finished that big round of assignments at the end of last weekend, and so far you have received your grades for the production technique and the technical assignment. If you haven't checked in the past little while, kind of slid those in right before this evening. So that is your game composition. No, sorry. That is your chiptune composition and your 2D platformer sound effects. So those are completed and back to you. And I will, by the end of tomorrow, by the end of Wednesday, I will have completed your Angry Bots compositions. So we will talk about those certainly this evening, but everybody will have their feedback by the end of tomorrow, and the new week 2 revision assignment again will open up on Thursday and Friday. So let's see, where is it? We have some submissions here. There we go. These are the submissions this is the peer review and feedback for Angry Bots, and so we have 10 things to listen to tonight. And these are some good projects from our week 2 game composition. So we will go ahead and load those up and listen to those towards the end of this evening. But I think that gets us all caught up with our assignments and keeps us going full steam ahead through the end of the month. One thing I do want to point out that can sometimes throw people off is I always grade the new week's assignments before I go back to the previous week's revisions, because I want to get everything to you by the Wednesday after you have completed and submitted your assignments. And so I want to get everything and keep it on track and get those grades and those grade sheets back to you so that on Thursday and Friday you can have the opportunity to do revisions. So I get all of the new week's assignments out of the way and graded, and then I go back while you are working on your new round of revisions on Thursday and Friday, or towards the end of the week in general. I will go back and this week I'll do the week 1 revisions, next week I'll do week 2 revisions, and so on. So hopefully that helps out with where we are at with our assignments. If you have, it's been pretty quiet on the communications overall, so I'm assuming that you guys are pretty clear over in general about the assignments. Well, certainly we'll be discussing the new ones here, but on the assignments that we've had so far, and no big technical issues. So we'll go through the rest of the month, hopefully as smoothly as that. And all right, so let me just make sure that I hit on everything before we get into the new assignments. We got week 1 revisions. We've got the week 2 assignments turned in. We're discussing the week 3 assignments, and then we'll go back and listen to some of the Angry Bots compositions through the end of this evening. All right. So I will do my weekly poll of have you checked out the assignments? Have you downloaded and checked out our new game this week? Go ahead and give me a yes or a no and a positive in the chat. It looks like some good positive responses. We got a whole bunch of yeses there. This is our new game, Palace of Orenthalion. Right there, we got a slick picture of that. Palace of Orenthalion is such a mouthful. It is the official title of this environment that the game is set in. But I just end up calling it the Palace game. So I will, but everywhere you see it officially laid out. Palace of Orenthalion is actually made by Garage Games, and they have created this environment that is a kind of I see it as a temple, an ancient temple that is set in an open world fantasy game. And we are going to talk about what all that means and what does that mean for the music. Of course, the game composition this week, just like all of the previous games, you will be in charge of creating the music soundtrack. And the final result of this game ends up being a series of WAV files, and we'll talk about how those WAV files are set up and used in the game. So let's talk about where the game comes from and how what our use of it is. The game is built in the Unity 3D game engine. We'll talk about what that means as we get more into the technology through the rest of the month. But you have hopefully noticed so far that all of our games, when you start them out, they bring up a Unity logo and saying I built my game in Unity, or the Unity game engine is kind of like saying I recorded my album in Logic or Pro Tools. It's a pretty industry standard piece of software that is used to create the game. And so one of the things, one of the very important and great aspects of all of this game software is that it is free and available to download and to use and to work with, and to, you can certainly change sound and music, and there's all sorts of demo projects that are available. And one very cool thing that they've done is created an asset store. It's kind of like iTunes or the App Store. It's an online store that you can buy graphics and models and animations and sounds and all sorts of things. And in some of this material, there is free demos and environments. And so to kind of show off how these games work and how you might build your own game, people put out free projects for you to learn and explore. And so that's where Palace of Orinthalion comes from. If you went online and typed in Unity Asset Store, you would certainly find that, and you could search for Palace of Orinthalion and see how it all works. But for our purposes, number one, it's free, and we demo purposes and educational purposes, we can use it as our project to show everything off. But really, it gives us an environment to have a game and have our music soundtrack, or it gives us a game to show off how our music might work. And the purpose of this game and the music soundtrack is to explore a vertical music system. And we will talk more about this on Thursday, where we discuss the ideas and differences between a horizontal and a vertical music system. We said earlier on in the month that a music system is the thing inside of the game that plays back your music, and that's a really, really generic, vague term. It's the part of the game or the part of the software or the part of the code that actually plays your WAV files. And how it does that and what it does with your WAV files is very specific to each game. And so our first game, 2D platformer, was all, our focus was the idea of intros, loops, and endings, and we had variations of all of those. Last week, Angry Bots was all about ambient and action, and how do we switch back and forth between ambient and action. And so each one of those games is known as a horizontal music system, or horizontal composition, or horizontal resequencing. There's all sorts of different names for it, but the main difference between a horizontal and a vertical music system, in a horizontal setup, you think about one single track where regions are laid out horizontally back to back. You only hear one piece of music at any time, and the game, all it's really going to do is switch between multiple pieces of music, and those pieces of music are interchangeable. And if we know that our intros and endings are going to be 2 bars, and our main loops are going to be 8 bars, and with ambient and action we have 8-bar action loops and minute-long ambient loops. If we have some sort of specification that we can follow, then the game knows exactly which piece of music to put in and play at the exact right time. But one of the main restrictions or rules of a horizontal music system is that you're only hearing one piece of music at a time. So think of a single stereo track and regions horizontally placed next to each other in a line back to back. Now, that means you only hear one thing at a time. A vertical music system, to compare against that, is think about a multi-track DAW session where you have multiple files playing at the same time, and you can fade them in and out and turn them on and off at different points. And so our purpose here is, how do we bring in new musical ideas to play along with already established musical themes? How can we bring a new drum loop in over top of an already playing string and reed section? How do we bring in different musical ideas anytime we want without having to wait 8 bars or 1 minute or however long our particular music cue is? So let's check out the game here. Let me just hit open. I mean, it takes a moment to load up. So while that there goes. Yes. All right, well, that's doing its thing. Actually, one thing I should show you is we do have demo tracks, but here's a visual for what I'm talking about in a vertical music system. We have multiple files. They're all playing at the same time, and they're vertically stacked on top of each other. The main purpose here is that they're all going to start at the same time, and they're going to end at the same time, so that means that they're going to loop at the same time. In order for these pieces of music to work together, they all need to sonically, harmonically, melodically, all of these elements, they need to work and play at the same time and mesh musically. So think about it as 4 individual music tracks playing at the same time. Maybe a DJ with 4 turntables playing at the same time. If they're going to actually make them work and play together, they need to be mixed and they need to be at the same tempo and in the same key so that you can bring in and out any of these tracks at any point that you want. This is really what we're doing when we record a multi-track session, right? If you go into the studio and you have a drummer and a bassist and a guitarist and keys and horns and background vocals and lead vocals, all of these different elements are part of the same song. They are in the same key. They are in the same tempo. So when you put them back together and you play them at the same time, you start them all at the same time at the correct point, then you know it's always going to play correctly. And you can then use your faders to bring up and down any element that you want. And instead of thinking about music in separated by instruments, where all of my drums go together and all of my brass go together and all of my strings or guitars go together or whatever, don't group them by instruments. Now what we are going to do is group them by musical themes or group them by intensity, or we're going to group them by particular not pace, but if you want to double or half a tempo, you can still stay within the general bounds of the rhythm that you have established. But you can think about groups of rhythmic content. You can think of groups of instrumentation content. You can think about groups of thematic content. And it's not just the fact that all of a instrument family always has to be grouped together. You can introduce new musical ideas anytime you want because everything is going to play at the same time. So let's explain our 4 tracks. The final thing that you will create is a series of 4 wave files. Those wave files are either going to be 16-bit, 16 bars or 32 bars long. And musically, they are going to start at the same time, they're going to end at the same time, they're going to be able to loop at the same time, and they're going to work melodically, harmonically, rhythmically, sonically, any of those adjectives we can throw on it, and they have to be able to play. It has to make sense. If you just bring up one of them, there has to be enough instrumentation that represents the theme or the aesthetic of one particular piece of music. If you bring in another one or 3 or all 4 of them, it still has to make sense. It'll become more and more dense as you add in more instrument layers or more groups of instruments or a new cue. but still all of those instruments have to make sense and work around the same core foundation or progression. So let's talk about the game first, and then we'll talk about the music itself and how that can be built. So hopefully, here we go. Hold on, let me take a quick pause here. Let me know if you have any questions as in that overall introduction. Let me pause for just a moment. All right. So, where did my mouse go? There we go. So this environment is meant to be a temple to the ancient elements of the earth. You might recognize earth, wind, fire, and water. Those are also corresponding to our 4 musical themes. They are each going to be either 16-bit, I said it again, 16 bars or 32 bars long. And very quickly when playing this game, right, you could just kind of walk out one of these doors and kind of go on forever, and you probably will end up hitting some invisible wall out there. And one thing that you will notice is there's not much of a game here. It's just 4 different paths. These represent 4 different directions that the player or the hero can take. They represent 4 different parts of the overall story, and they are going to have each one of them is going to have its own thematic piece of music that represents that part of the story and that part of the hero's journey. So, and then whenever you walk out each one of these doors, actually, I should start with, the game starts silent. When you first drop into the game, I think you just kind of start over here and you're staring at one of the doors. And the game starts out silent. And you walk out, and the player has a choice of walking out any one of these doors and effectively turning on that piece of music or listening to that piece of music. So when you walk out one of these doors, a text prompt shows up and says press E to engage, and when you do that, we'll see if this plays anything. Okay, we'll get it to play here in just a sec. But when you hit E, it fires up these massive torches here, and it's also going to start the music. And then the player can come back out here at any point and turn it off, and the music will fade out. And the overall purpose here is that the player is able to turn on and off any one of these pieces of music at any time. And so you have no control over when they are going to hear a piece of music and what they are going to hear. Now, we've set it up so that it doesn't matter. It's going to, any possibility is always going to work. But how do we set it up so that any new piece of music can be introduced at any time and it will still and always musically make sense? It won't just be out of time or out of key or just plain sound weird. It's all going to make sense. So let me set this up so we can hear something. Let me start here. What am I doing? I think I need to do this. And then I think I'm going to have to turn this down so it doesn't completely blast, but that's also going to turn down my microphone. So just we're going to turn this on and make sure we can hear the audio and also hear me. So player makes a choice, and they are going to walk out one of these doors, and they hit E to engage. Let me turn down the volume. E. All right, are you able to hear that? And are you able to still hear me? Yes. Yes, excellent. All right. So, let me turn this off. Press E. Notice it fades out. And the thing to know is that when the game starts, all 4 of these pieces of music, all 4 of these wave files, they all start at the same time. Let me go back here. Not there. Let me go back here. It's kind of like, here's our 4 wave files, or 4 loops, 16 bars or 32 bars long. Earth, wind, fire, and water. When the game starts, all 4 pieces of music are silent. All the volumes are down at negative infinity. And when you start playing, or when the game starts, it immediately starts all of them playing, but you can't hear any of them. So the game starts out silent. Now, it does this so that you can turn on any of these pieces of music whenever you want, and it's always going to make sense. So that's what happens here, right? And the player can go ahead and walk out any direction and turn on that piece of music. When they hit E, it's like this fader rising to unity. Now, you, as the composer, you are going to create your music with the intention that all the game is going to do is bring your faders back to unity. So the final mix that you want has to make sense with all of the faders at unity, because the only 2 options are on or off, right? And it takes about 3 seconds for that music to fade in and out. Let me make sure we can hear logic too. That might help. Hello. All right, let's try this. There we go. All right, so walking out and turning on, hitting the letter E, the key on your keyboard, turns this earth, fades it up and down. And so let me do that. If I go out here, loud, turn you down, and back. All right. The music stays on. It'll go forever. It'll loop around and around. If we just sat here, this would just go around and around in those 16 or 32 bars, however long it goes. The other thing to know is that these are also looping around and around in the same tempo, so they will always match. So now I go back over here, and I can turn on the wind cue. Piece of music stays playing. I hit E. You hear a new theme introduced. Michael, I will answer your question here in just a sec. 3 throw that in there also. You go out to the fire queue and turn this one on. Now I can go back, turn off the earth queue. You can see each combination changes kind of the feel. Go out to the water queue, turn these on. Hear the choirs come in. Turn the fire off. Off. No matter what combination I turn them on and off, or when, or how it ever is going to happen in the game, I always know it's going to work. So the question, Michael, in the chat, did you say the music fades out as well? Yes, the fade in and out are about 3 seconds each. The torches are just there to give you visual confirmation that that's happening. It's always a fun part about audio for video games is you can't actually see it happen. All the graphics guys can see issues and glitches, and it's visually right in front of them. But sound is a little bit more difficult. Well, I don't want to say more difficult, but that aspect can be a challenge because it's invisible. Hold on just a sec. All right. Okay. I'm spinning around. Okay. So, earth, wind, fire, water. Let me go over to here so we can have a little bit more control over the level and all of that. Bring that back up. Control that. Okay. So, as we have seen, let's see. When the game starts, all 4 of these are silent. When you go out any particular direction, you bring up a fader, or they press E on their keyboard, fades in over 3 seconds. They press E again and it fades out. And our overall challenge here is to make sure that whether I'm playing 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them, it always makes sense. They need to make sense with enough instrumentation and melody and harmony on their own, and each combination, each new layer that's brought in needs to make sense when playing back. We'll talk about how to do this, how to set up all right. So let's talk about each one of these musical cues and the theme that's intended. So the player can walk out any one of those doors and turn on the torches, and that sort of represents them going off in 4 different directions of a storyline, or 4 different parts of a storyline or encounters. So the Earth cue represents the hero and the hero's journey, right? It's kind of the beginning and the overview and the overall direction that the player is headed. It represents probably everything that is good and heroic and adventurous, positive, and anticipation of the adventure before you. So It's going to be strong and heavily melodic. Each one of these cues should have about 4 or 5 instrument layers to represent each cue. And so when you add that up across 4 musical cues, you're going to end up with 16 to 20 to 25 instrument layers. I guess I should also point out, certainly this is very important, that the sound palette or the instrumentation that is required for this project is we're going to keep it entirely to orchestral acoustic instrumentation. So this represents a fantasy game, open world fantasy games that are typically in line of finds its history in Legend of Zelda from video game side of things, but more representative of today, World of Warcraft, Skyrim series or Elder Scroll series, Dragon's Age is very, very popular. There are all sorts of these sort of fantasy world games that typically have large orchestral scores. And so last week it was all futuristic, modern production styles, electronic drum machines, synths, and so we throw all of that stuff away. No synthesizer. I mean, you're going to be using samples and sample libraries, so it is some aspect. It's not completely acoustic, but our intention is to use acoustic instrumentation, orchestral instrumentation. So your strings, your brass, your woodwinds, orchestral percussion, pianos, harps, harpsichords. We'll go through each cue. Also finds most of its voice in your choice of instrumentation. So a heroic melodic theme from the Earth cue. This is probably going to be, I kind of picture this one as it's the local town bard or musician or entertainer, and they're singing the praises and the story of the local hero as they go off on their journey, and they're performing for the king or the local, the town leadership or whatever it is. And it is typical, should probably be smaller handheld instrumentation. So lutes and harps and small winds, flutes and reeds and tin whistles, and maybe some light hand percussion, hand drums, shakers, chimes, things like that might work. And so you should have each cue is going to be represented heavily by its melody. And by the end of it, you're going to have 4 melodies playing off of each other. So they don't all need to be dense and have a lot of... you don't want to make them too rapid or have too much complexity on each layer. But you are going to end up with 4 melodic themes playing against each other. And by the time you have all 4 of these playing, it may not always be the case, but the player does have the option of turning on all 4 of them. It will be dense overall, but you need to make sure that they all fit together. So there needs to be something that represents melody, something that represents harmony or even counter melody, often something in the bass or I don't want to say a bass line, but something in the lower registers, and some percussion. All of these cues may not need percussion. Some of them are much more percussive or percussion heavy. So the Earth cue is, think about a group of entertainers with their handheld instruments singing the praises of the local town hero. For the Wind cue, the Wind cue represents... represents the danger that the player is going to encounter. It represents anticipation. It is not the battle or the action or the fighting at that point. We haven't reached there, but it is everything that builds up to that. So maybe it represents stealth, where the player is trying to sneak around the enemy. Maybe they know it, or the player knows it. Maybe they don't, but they're in danger at that point. They let's say they see the enemy off in the distance, and they're trying to slowly creep around and avoid the enemy, and so that's everything building up the anticipation right before they engage into battle. So this works in a lot of more lower, creepier tones with elements of maybe some high-pitched strings, maybe some tremolos. Here in the chat, can we use orchestral bass drum? Yeah, that could work. Big bass drums that kind of hit and or kind of add a little pulse. There might be a little bit of rhythm in there that kind of says, okay, here comes a little bit of pace. We need to watch out. But you're trying to build the anticipation, the sense of dread, build up the intensity just a little bit, kind of warn the player something is coming. This one doesn't need necessarily a strong melody that's going to like just totally pronounce itself and sing the praises of what's going on. It's typically a little bit more low key and can really work well with some lower strings, double basses and cellos. French horns can maybe work here, and then maybe some really high string lines to kind of add the edge to it. A little bit of percussion, nothing too strong because you still haven't reached the loudest peak yet. And that's what comes next. The fire cue represents the action, the battle. Now you're fighting the enemy. This is the full pace, the full instrumentation. It's your loudest cue. It's the strongest cue. It has the most intensity and action and pace to it. So big orchestral sections, big timpanis, bass drums, marching, rolling snares, big cymbal crashes, lots of brass and strings work well here. So this is the intense. This is the hero is locked in an epic struggle, and they are trying to win and defeat the enemy. So this is your biggest and loudest. Strong melodic theme, but really focused on the percussion and the power of the cue. And the final one here, the water cue, represents the all of the emotional twists and turns and the ups and downs of the game. So this certainly, as you're telling a story, you have surprises and changes, and this is all of the good and the bad. So it can run to any end of the spectrum. It can be everything that is good and lovely and happy, and this can represent winning and maybe the hero saved the town or rescued their family, or they have found the secret treasure or something. It is everything that is good and positive and uplifting in the story, or it represents everything that is down and bad or sad or despair represented in the story. So it can be loss or longing or death or losing or destroy or destruction or something to that. So it is the emotional ups and downs of the story. So this is going to have a strong emotional musical theme or melodic theme that really whatever you're doing here is you're pulling at the heartstrings of the player. So whether it is positive or negative, you can go in a strong major key here, or go to the relative minor and totally bum us all out. And so the water cue represents the emotional themes. Strings work well, pianos, harps, any of those kind of big, sappy, emotional thematic instrumentation there. So heavily melodic, may not need a whole bunch of percussion at this point. And so each one of these cues has fulfills its own musical theme or overall kind of aesthetic by your choice of instrumentation and your melodic theme. Those are going to be the two main things that give it make it unique, because otherwise they need to sound very much, well, I don't want to say that. I was going to say they need to sound very much the same, but they need to have a lot of things in common. So how do you, if you have to write music that everything has to be in the same key, everything has to be at the same tempo and the same time signature, and the main thing is they all have to work together melodically and harmonically. So that means that they need to all follow the same core progression or structure in order to make them fit together. So how do you make something that is, or four musical layers that are unique enough if they all have to follow those same rules? They all have to follow the same key, same tempo, same time signature, and same progression. Well, you do that with your choice of instrumentation and melody. So the way I would set up this session is, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday, but I definitely want to put it in terms of this assignment, a top-down musical approach for a vertical music session. Top-down, meaning don't think about the macro ideas, the big ideas, the overall ideas of this composition first before you get lost in all of the details of what instrument are going to be playing what notes. The biggest thing, the biggest trouble or challenge out of this composition is you have to make all four of these cues make sense and play together. Again, melodically, harmonically, rhythmically, sonically, mix-wise. They all have to make sense, even if all four of them are all playing together. And so the hardest part, the challenge of this is it is kind of like a puzzle, because what you can do is very easily paint yourself into a corner musically, right? Where you'll start running out of choices and running out of options. You only have so many notes in a particular key before things start clashing and dissonance, and it all sounds all, you can't throw all 12 notes at it. You got to pick and stick with a key. So you only have so many choices of notes, and you only have so many rhythmic subdivisions. You can only have so many whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighths notes, sixteenths, and you can divide it so many times, or else it's going to get so fast crazy that it'll lose its sense. So pitch and time, that's really what you're doing with your composition. You're choosing what notes play and when do they play. And so you can very quickly, if you don't think about the overall structure, the overall composition, you can really paint yourself into a corner, lose all your options, because you are building up note by note. And you say, okay, I'm going to start out and I'm going to write a French horn line. Okay, boom. Here's my 16 bars of French horn. All right, now I'm going to write cello. Here's my 16 bars of cello. All right, violas. 16 bars of that. And just go instrument by instrument, and build up. Then you have run the risk of either running out of ideas or having things clash and just not piece and work together. So the biggest challenge of this is the composition, the actual notes themselves. Your choice of what instruments are going to play, strings, brass, or woodwinds, or percussion, or how you group them together, or making them loop, or mixing, all of that stuff is secondary or defined by your composition. How your notes play and work together is going to kind of determine the success of the overall composition. So the first thing to do is start out with the notes. Start out with the composition. Don't think about instrumentation. Don't think about mix or layers or fire, wind, water, all that. All you need to do is you're going to figure out what your composition is going to be. You're going to start out and say, okay, I'm going to write 16 bars or I'm going to write 32 bars. And you know that you're going to need to build a chord progression, a core foundation that everything's going to follow. So it doesn't matter what instrument that is. Probably the best, most straightforward is to load up a piano patch because it allows you to get notes in the lower registers and the higher registers. You can kind of start out by figuring out the composition. Start with the chord progression. You are going to build, you got 16 bars or 32 bars. You are going to build your chord progression that evolves and develops over that those 16 bars, right? Don't give me 4 chords repeated 4 times to build out your 16 bars. Develop your progression. You are going to choose 8 or 16 or 32 chords or whatever the combination is of your chord progression. And you will determine everything is going to follow that progression. And by building your chord progression, you have a series of 3-part or 4-part harmonies that you can then use to build out the rest of your composition. So everything has to follow that main chord progression. And if I follow that, then I know it's all going to piece back together and it's going to work. Then each one of these cues needs to have its own melody. So I know it's a requirement of the assignment. I know I have to have a melody. So I will, on that chord progression, I will now write out 4 or 5 melodies just to have a safe one extra in case I need it, but have at least 4 melodic ideas that run those 16 bars or 32 bars long that work and play over that chord progression. Once you have that as your composition, you have the core structure of your building out the rest of your composition, rest of your session. So now I have a series of chords, 3 voices or 4 voices to each chord, and I can start determining and building out my chord progression through each one of these cues. So I don't need all 3 or 4 voices in every single one of these cues, right? We're not going to do the exact same chords in the same inversions across all 4 of these cues. And on this one, it's trumpets playing, and on this one, it's a piano playing, and it's the exact same notes. You don't want to reduce it down and repeat your idea over and over again between each cue. You need to find its own unique variation on it. So 3 or 4 voices to build out your cues, and you can start figuring out that it's probably not going to be this straightforward, but maybe all of your first voice represents elements in your lower registers. Your thirds and fifths represents your harmonic layers. And then you've got your melodies on top. Throw some sevenths in there for flavor. And you can start building out a structure. And through a combination of inversions and unisons and octaves, moving up and down the octaves to bring it into the right ranges for your instruments, you can start building a composition that will always work together. That is the top-down approach. Build your composition, your overall structure first, and then fill it out with the details after that. Then at some point I would just kind of think about what instruments you want to represent each one of these cues. Pick out 4 or 5 instruments that are unique. One restriction is for this composition is you will not have any instrument copied from one cue to the next. If you need strings in multiple cues, that's fine. You can repeat violins in multiple. You probably don't need them in all 4 of them, but if you need to have a cello section in multiple cues, that's fine. You just can't copy the exact same line. We don't want the same instrument playing the same MIDI notes in multiple cues. The game is going to layer everything for you. You do not need to repeat any instrumentation. Sometimes I'll hear the earth cue has all of its instruments, but the wind cue has the earth and the wind. And then the fire has earth, wind, and fire, and the water has earth, wind, fire, and water. It's the whole composition in just one water cue. The game is going to mix everything for you. If you double things up in cues, then it's just going to double up in the mix and be loud. It's not going to be any different. It's just going to be louder. So do not repeat any MIDI information. Don't repeat or just copy things. The other thing is don't copy the same MIDI notes to multiple instruments. You have the same exact line, but it's on your violins and trumpets. That most of the time doesn't work out all that well and make much sense. You're going to have to have them move in their own directions or have separate melodic lines. What else? Okay, I think that'll be... let's actually listen to this again. Well, we did this first one. Let me just talk about it again now that I've mentioned more about the instruments and how to build it out. Move this down. So again, the earth cue here is going to represent the hero's journey. It's positive and uplifting. It's light and typically pretty bouncy and maybe staccato. Strong melodic lead. The wind cue comes in. This represents the danger, the maybe foreboding before the battle. Represents the enemy. What else? Maybe a stealth element. So lower instrumentation. There's a little harp in here that provides just a hint of a melody. So the fire cue represents the battle itself. Big drums, big percussion. Strong melodic. Oh, turn this up a little bit. What else? And the water cue. Represents the emotional side of things, the more sensitive side of the composition. Represents good and everything positive in the game, or represents loneliness and loss and despair, all the bad stuff in there. So it's your choice. You should probably stick to a certain key, but you might be able to go to the relative minor or use some modal writing to still maintain around that tonal center, but be able to move off in new ideas and directions. So, let's do the other one too. Start out with the earth cue. This one certainly has a strong heroic lead. It's a little more intense to start with, which can work. Notice that the melodic line and the progression develops through the entire 16 bars. It doesn't repeat ideas. Oh, this is off. This is fire, this is wind, water. Water. Oh, sorry, wind. All right. Has some creepy sound effects that are very identifiable from Logic, but more of a thin kind of strain through the cue. There's some low end. There's a little bounce from the bass. Fire cue. Here's the power and the intensity. Big bass drums, cymbals. I think there's some dwarves chanting back there. The water cue. Emotional string line there. Again, a strong melodic lead. And the key is that it still always has to make sense if all of them are brought in together. Again, it'll sound dense overall, but it'll still musically make sense. All right, I think should give us some solid ideas for this composition. We went over the game and how that works. Again, when you finish your composition, you can always go to Show Package Contents. Hopefully you're doing this with all of your music and sound effects for each one of your games, but you can go to Contents and Data and Streaming Assets and go into the music and drop your 4 audio files in there. And check out how it works in the game. Don't need that anymore. Let's see. I have this right here. I think made by GearTech Games. An overview of the game and vertical orchestration, how it all works together. A minimum of at least 16 tracks. So really, just 4 instrument tracks is probably not going to do it for things like the earth and the fire cue. Probably all of them would be better to have 5 or more tracks just to have enough complexity, enough elements going on. How the game plays and how all of the music works together. Description of the earth, wind, fire, and water cues. How to play the game and some reference tracks to check out, suggested instrumentation. Again, keep everything to acoustic and orchestral instruments. There's also an aspect of every once in a while I'll get things like a drum kit setup where it's not an orchestral percussion. And it can sound too modern at points. So watch out for like more modern drum patterns. Descriptions and screenshots of each one of the cues and what they represent in the game. And then, of course, screenshots and delivery. All right. So hopefully that gives us all the info we need for our game composition. The next one here will feel quite familiar, but it's also a fun set of sounds to work on. So just like last week where you were creating all of the sounds for 2D platformer, we want to go back and now focus on the sound design for Angry Bots, which of course is fun robots and explosions and things like that. So there's definitely some enjoyable sound effects here. But the setup and the approach to working on this assignment is very similar to your technical assignment for last week. So it'll give you a good opportunity to get working. Let me scroll down to the asset list so we see what we're talking about here. Ambiences, the sounds for the different robots, different doors. So the way that I like to approach these kind of sound design sessions is to look for similar sounds, look for groups of sounds that you can knock out in a group, and then kind of break it down into, hopefully you can get a group of sounds done pretty quickly before you move on to all the individual ones. So I can tell you in the sound design for this one, there are lots of explosions and there are lots of doors in this game. So you have, each one of the robots has its own explosion when it's destroyed, and there might be some multiple explosions. So the flying buzzer has a destroyed explosion. The spider bot has a destroyed explosion. The patrol mech has a destroyed explosion. The spider can also self-destruct. The patrol mech shoots missiles. So that's like 5 or 6 of those sounds, of explosion sounds. Then there's a whole bunch of doors. Airlock door, interior doors, locked doors opening. So you can hit those pretty solidly. But just to give us some examples here, let's see what's probably the best way of doing this. Let me go into Angry Bots here. So just like last week, I would suggest that you go into the game, right-click on the icon of the game, do Show Package Contents, and you can navigate to all of the original files from the game. Go to Contents, go to Data, go to Streaming Assets, and then Sound Effects. And you're going to find all of the sound effects from the game. And then just create a new session here. Import those files. You know what? I don't want to import them, because I want to see the file names just for demo purposes. You would import them into your session, but we can just hear them here so we can see all the file names. All right, let's see if this works. Hold on. Again, I'm going to turn this down just a little bit so we don't blast anything. So airlock doors. All right, give me a heads up. You can hear that? I think you can. I think that looked like it worked. Yes, okay, good. So let's just run through some of these sounds here. Airlock doors, let's do all the doors first. Open and close. You might even be able to get away with just reversing one of the sounds to create the opposite. Open or close. Interior doors. Locked doors. That didn't even sound like a door to me, but that works. Then you have a couple of ambiences. Here's a rain ambience. Find a loop of rain. There's an interior hum, which is kind of a nondescript room tone. Then let's do all the explosions. Destroyed explosion. Destroyed explosion. Goodness, that's huge. That even distorts. Missile explosion. Spider destroyed. Spider self-destruct. All right, so find all those explosions. Then you have things like the zap, alert sound. Oh yeah, each one of them have an alert sound. When each of the robots wake up, they make some sort of sound. Actually, you know what? It's only the two. It's only Patrol Mech and the Spider. right? So those can even be maybe your voice with kind of a robot effect. I heard that a couple times. It works well. Footsteps for the big patrol mech. This is the big robot. Those are very. These are identical. Don't make yours identical. 2 footsteps. Shoot missile. Spider alert sound. Oh, we did that. Proximity. Notice. Notice with the spider proximity, it's just a beep. The game actually, as they get closer and closer, the beeps get faster and faster. So you just need to make that a little beep. Doors, players hit. That can just be you. Shooting. All right, that's a machine gun kind of sound. I would actually follow. You might follow the actual pulse of those shots, counting them and putting them in the same kind of the pace, because I think that matches up with the animation of them actually firing. Terminal hacked. You can hack a computer in the game. That can also be a voice or just some sort of effect. All right, so you'll just build the sounds. Bounce them out, format them, and deliver them. Check them out in the game. Make sure they all work properly. Gives you images and screenshots of what each one of those sounds are. Or you could just play through the game and just listen out for where the sounds occur. Here in the chat, Stephen, what were the stingers we made for? The stingers are going to play along with the action cues in Angry Bots. Since there was only one action cue per robot, right? You didn't make multiple variations. We didn't want each one of those files to start the exact same way each time they're triggered, right? You run into a lot of the spider bots in the game, and so we don't want to hear the exact same start of the music every single time you run into one of the robots and hear the action music. So along as the action music starts, the stingers play so that it provides a little variation. So the stingers should be really sharp musical impacts that hit right as the same time as the action cue plays, and then it needs to fade out very quickly. So it's used to hide and mask the transition as you're going from ambient to action, and it's to give a little bit of variation each time it's played, because now there are 3 different stingers and 3 different music cues, so you have multiple combinations when they're played together. So I thought you were the robot wake-ups. No. All right. So, yeah, it could... Actually, I would say they're kind of similar, but they happen at slightly different points. The action music happens when one of the either robot or player takes damage. But the robot wake-ups could happen... They're typically just a few seconds beforehand, but they are separate events overall. So, but they're almost similar ideas where they indicate that the action has started and that they're about to get into battle. All right, so technical assignment. That was always fun to, number one, to do and to listen to. It's got some interesting sound design to work with there. Your production technique this week will have you building a orchestral template using Logic and Contact. And the intention here is that you do the production technique first, you create the orchestral template for Logic, and then you use it to create your game composition. One thing that I found pretty early on when doing The orchestral composition for this kind of open world fantasy game was that while people were not necessarily using the best sounds that they had access to, the their compositions were suffering because of their instrumentation, either their choice of which instrument sample or sample library or patch that they were using, or using incorrect articulations where it would feel like an incorrect performance of the notes. So they were doing fast, short staccato runs and using legato sounds, or the other way around, doing slow, emotional legato lines and using a staccato sound to do it. So I was finding that the quality of the compositions were suffering from the instrumentation and the articulations used. So building this orchestral template will give you kind of the instrument map that you need to have quick and easy access to for building this game composition. So that's not the session that I want. Where's my session? Where's this one? So here is my version. Oh. Go away, inspector. Okay. So templates, Logic templates, Pro Tools templates, whatever your DAW template is. Templates are very handy tools to work efficiently. If you're like me, when you are creating music and you're starting out, you have this awesome idea for music. You're like, oh, listen to that melody, oh, that rhythm in my brain. I just got to get this out. All right, I'm going to turn on my computer, then wait for that to boot up, and then I'm going to load up Logic and wait for that to load up, and then I'm going to start creating tracks. And I am going to create some software instrument tracks, and then I'm going to place some software instruments on those tracks. Then I'm going to go through some presets and try to find some sound that is actually usable. And then I'm going to want some effects, so maybe I load up some plugins. Maybe I load up some reverbs and sends, and so I have sends and buses and aux tracks and aux returns, and to route my buses and my sends to my reverbs and delays and whatever time-based processing I want. And I set up some groups, and I name some tracks, and I route things here and there, and then I want to get my guitar set up, so I create an audio track, and I plug my guitar into my audio interface, and I route everything, and maybe by then, I run out of ideas. Or no, I've lost the idea. Like I've lost the inspiration because I have taken too long to get everything set up. It is time consuming to start from scratch every single time. And so a template can help this process out. If you have certain default tools that you like to work with, and a certain flow that you can use over and over again, then you might as well set that up as a template. And an orchestral template works out quite well because there are certain standards and traditions and setups of an orchestral setup to follow that you can build a template that you can utilize quite well over and over. And then beyond this, you should end up creating templates for whatever sort of workflow that you do, right? Eventually, you might have a recording template and a hip-hop template and a rock template, an orchestral template, an electronic music template, and a sound effects template, and a post music to a movie template, and a mixing template, and who knows? The people that are successful in as composers are the ones that are efficient at it and do good work quickly, because everybody's human and nobody's perfect, and everybody loves to procrastinate, and nobody does things when ahead of time when they should. And so that means clients are doing that and are going to contact you at the very end and be like, oh yeah, hey, you know what, I just realized I need music, and this thing is going to broadcast in 24 hours or 48 hours, and or this game is, I need to send a demo out to some high people, whatever, corporate people that I need approval on. So quick, I need some music. And so being able to knock things out quickly and efficiently, especially if you're like recording with an artist, is very, very handy and a positive thing to do. So an orchestral template is a good place to start for all this. A couple things here in the chat. Michael, I bet this is a heavy session on your RAM, and it absolutely can be. If we have all of these loaded up at the same time, I will definitely address that, because there is a possibility that as you are setting up this template, that your computer will start running out of RAM and going slow, and it'll start melting and crying, and all sorts of bad things will happen because you're running out of RAM. And we need to figure out ways around that, because we can't have that. So we'll definitely talk about the RAM usage in all of this. Stephen, I had a problem routing when I put contact in. I guess you have to reroute the output somehow. So yeah, let me show you how all of this will be set up. First off, there's 56 tracks. These 56 tracks are 14 different instruments. Each of the instruments have 4 different articulations. So we'll talk about what all that means. We have piccolos, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and contrabassoons. We have all of the winds. We have French horns, trumpets, trombones, and tubas. We have the brass. We have violins, violas, cellos, and double bass for our strings. I didn't get into percussion because that opens up a whole bunch of different things, right? Because now you've got an individual patch for each percussion instrument. Like you have one patch for all sorts of snares and one for all sorts of timpanis, and plus percussion can be one of the elements that is the most variable in these types of pieces of music. So plus 56 tracks is enough, gets the point across, gives us a full assignment. The other thing to point out is it's 56 tracks, and there's a whole bunch of naming of stuff and routing of stuff and getting it all set up. Once you get the kind of the flow down, it is a bit mindless, right? You just kind of go through the steps and get it all going, and so people end up doing quite well overall. But it's a bit tedious, and that's kind of the point of templates, is you do it once, you take a lot of time, you get it all perfectly set up, named and everything, so it all works well for you, and then you save it as a template, and then you don't do it again over and over and over again. So yes, it is a bit detailed and involved, but yeah, then that's what gets you going very quickly. So here's how this is going to work. I'll just rebuild these piccolos here. Probably won't, I'll name some stuff, but won't go through all of the steps. Oh, let me do this also. I do want to point out that there is a PDF workflow somewhere. Which one of my millions of documents do I have? That is this production technique workflow. There it is. There it goes. Come on. You can do it. There you go. Slides, right? Gives you step-by-step flow of how to go through this process. Talking about all sorts of stuff here and all of the steps. So definitely use this as a guide. Slide 3 does say, warning, you will run out of memory at some point. To fix this issue, step 1, save each context setup as a preset. Choose Reset Multi from the File menu, and in the delivered file, making sure each instance of contact is blank. We'll do all that stuff. We'll still say all that stuff. Here in the chat, is this archive still going? Yes. This one still has not crashed. And I'm kind of ticked that I might have lost the first 20 minutes. Okay, fine, you crashed. Don't delete the whole thing that you captured. Maybe when I stop it, it'll magically come back or something like that. But come on, ScreenFlow. What's wrong with you? Okay, so let's actually do this. We're going to, each instrument, 14 instruments, each instrument has 4 articulations. Hopefully you guys are familiar with articulations and key switching. Give me a heads up or a yes or a no in the chat. You've worked with articulations at some point. Maybe you've worked with key switching between those different articulations. You know what articulations are. Yes? Some? Okay. So at least the concept, right? The idea here is articulations are the way that the performer plays the note, right? We know what note it is. We know it's a G. We know it's a quarter note. But how do they play that? What inflection do they give to that note? And there are standard articulations that are quite common for different instruments. You'll see things here, sustain and staccato. Those are the 2 most common ones. Sustain are longer notes with slower attacks. A staccato note is a short, fast attack sound or a way of playing the note. Forte piano starts out loud and goes to soft. Sforzando starts out soft and raises to loud. So different inflections on the notes themselves. Every once in a while, different ones you'll have different, down here in the strings we get tremolo and pizzicato kinds of sounds. So different articulations, and those articulations you typically use key switching to switch them back and forth. Key switching is using some key and some off octave to change between sustain, forte piano, sforzando, and staccato. However, we are not going to use key switching. We are just going to lay them all out on different tracks. So let's talk about how we do this. We're going to rebuild the piccolo there. So I'm going to create some software instruments. Now, the assignment describes using multi-timbral software instrument tracks. When you create a new software instrument track, if you just create 2 instrument tracks, then it will create 2 tracks routed to 2 separate instruments. Where it doesn't know what they are yet, but that would end up being 2 instances of contact. Well, we don't want different instruments. We want 4 tracks to route to the same instrument. So we are going to use multi-timbral parts. We are going to have 1 track. I don't like the fact that it says track. We're 1 instrument with 4 multi-timbral parts. When you do this, it looks like it creates 4 tracks. Let me just bump this up here. But notice they all go to instrument 1. They all go to 4 different MIDI channels. The first one going to the same instrument, all instrument 1. First one goes to MIDI channel 1. Second one goes to MIDI channel 2. Third one goes to MIDI channel 3. And the fourth one goes to MIDI channel 4. Now, it doesn't know what instrument I want, but I don't want that. I want to go to instruments and to go to native instruments and go to contact. And I will choose contact here. What am I doing? Take that off. All right. So here, notice it's instrument 1. All 4 of these are going to instrument 1, but they're all going to 4 different MIDI channels. So now I'm going to load up my piccolo. So I go to contact factory library. In my contact factory library, I'm going to go to orchestral. In orchestral, I am going to, I'm doing piccolo, so I'm going to do my woodwinds. And I'm going to go to piccolo. And I'm just going to load up 4 instances of piccolo. 1, 2. Minimize. Minimize. Piccolo. 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 Right, so this is going to be piccolo, I think it's sustain. Piccolo sustain, piccolo, forte piano, piccolo, sforzando, and piccolo staccato, can't spell, staccato. Then I'm going to do this. Can I just steal these names here? Steal. Steal. Copy. Paste. Copy. Paste. Paste. All right. So now I have my 4 instruments. They're all piccolos. Piccolo, 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 piccolo. Piccolo. Okay, so I do my piccolo sustain. It's on channel 1. Why did my ones got flipped around? Hold on. Oop. I messed up my. What happened to my forte piano? Will you undo? No. Okay. Well, we'll just drag it out here. And we'll say piccolo, forte, piano, piano. All right, so we go to this sustain and we make sure it's on the sustain articulation and it's on MIDI channel 1. And then we go to forte piano and we make sure it's on MIDI channel 2 and we switch it to forte piano. And we go to sforzando and we make sure it's on MIDI channel 3 and we got sforzando. And we go to piccolo staccato, we go to MIDI channel 4 and we switch that to staccato. And doing that, we have the correct, let's get my little handy dandy keyboard. If we go to staccato, right, notice where my staccato plays. Oh goodness, that's probably hitting you. We don't actually want to hear it. Not right yet. I don't need to do that. Right, so all I have to do here is arm a particular track, and then I immediately get to that articulation. I don't have to key switch. The other thing I can do here is I can layer multiples together. So I can get new combinations of sounds. A lot of times it doesn't sound good, but sometimes it does. And so if I need to quickly get access to any one of my articulations on any one of my instruments, all I have to do is quickly arm it. And it's ready to go. So a couple of questions here that you might have. Number 1 was the RAM question, isn't this going to completely destroy my RAM? And the answer is could, yeah, possibility. But we're going to get around all of that. The other question is, well, if you're loading up 4 piccolos, aren't you quadrupling the amount of piccolo samples that you have? Aren't you loading up 4 times the amount of samples? And the thing to look for here is, notice that it says 17, all 4 of these are taking up 17 megabytes. No, whatever. Notice that it doesn't go down as I delete them until I get to the last one. That means only one of these is loaded, it only loads up those the RAM samples once, right? When I load up my first Piccolo, it loads up 17 megabytes of samples. That's cool. That's fine. That's how many the Piccolo takes. If I load up 4 instances of Piccolo, it's still at 17 megabytes. The Contact is very good in that it's smart enough to say, well, it's all Piccolo samples. You're just switching between the different articulations, so you just load up the samples once, and it uses them together. So you're not, if by loading up hundreds of Piccolo samples, I'm not increasing the RAM size anymore. I'm just manipulating them in different ways. So that's the first question, is loading up multiple instances, then you can have them set up. Here in the chat, Michael, could you possibly do more than 4 multi-timbral? Yes. It only goes to 16 channels per port. I say that never testing it. I assume that it stops at 16. But that should give you enough. Then beyond that, you're loading up multiple instances of Contact. The other thing that people mention sometimes is I use 1 instance of Contact per instrument. 1 instance for piccolos, 1 instance for flute, 1 instance for oboes. And a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just load up piccolos, flutes, oboes in 1 instrument and use multiple outs? Which is a very viable way of doing that, and actually might end up, if I would probably use up multi-outs, although I don't want to lead everybody through that process. It becomes quite complex, sometimes unnecessarily. The other reason is I can't actually fit Contact on my screen. It doesn't minimize, so I can't come down here to show you the outputs, and it gets a little bit needlessly complex inside of Contact to do that. But if you have any questions and you want to talk about multiple outputs, I can certainly do that. On one-on-one, we can go through that process with you. So now the next question is, I load up all of my piccolos, and I load up flutes and oboes and clarinets, and I end up loading up multiple articulations across 14 different instruments. There is a chance that this very quickly can make your computer start running slow and running out of RAM. So what you are going to do to minimize the impact of RAM, and this should be done not just because you're running out of RAM, but it's a very handy way to set everything up to make it as speedy as possible. All right, once I set up all my my piccolos, right, I have it ready to go. I don't want to save it with all of them loaded because it's taking up RAM, and I may not want piccolos, and it may be a while until I need piccolos. So no reason to have them always loaded up all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a preset. I'm going to clear everything out, and then whenever I want piccolos, I'm just going to load up my presets. So all you need to do to save this is you go to File, and you're going to do Save Multi-As. Let's talk about some terminology here. Notice it says multi-rack up here. The combination of these 4 instruments is a multi, or a multi-instrument. Each one of these is an instrument, and the combination of these 4 together create a multi. So if you want to save the combination of all 4 of them together, I'm going to do Save Multi-As. I'll call this, I think it's called Orchestral Piccolo, and you'd save it back to your folder, save it back to the session. I'm not going to do that right now, but then you'd hit Save, and you have that saved as a preset. Then you can come in here and you can do Reset Multi. When you reset it, it's going to clear everything out. You sure you want to erase everything and discard it all? Yes, I clear it all out. It clears out my sample RAM, and then if I ever need this back, then I can come back here and I'll just do Load Recent. And oh, that's right, I have a brand new computer. I'll load. Oh, just one. But it would show up there, right? You'd either go to Load and go find it, or you'd go to Load Recent and it'd show up right there. So this is how you're going to make your session, number one, not crash on you while you're doing it, and number two, not make it run slow while you are using it. So notice if I go to each one of these, there's a contact, there's an instance of contact. But if I load it up, here's my contrabassoon, but it's blank. And then I'd just go to File, and I'd go load up the preset, and I'd bring back all my contrabassoons. Right? So this is how you're going to deliver it to me. You're going to create everything. You're going to save it, save the presets, but you're going to blank out the instances of contact so that it loads up nice and easy, and it's real fast and doesn't take forever. I don't know what comments. No. Folders. Channel strip components. Comments. Track. Notes. Yay, no notes. All right. So, notice down here this would be Piccolo. I didn't color it correctly, or I haven't gone to color it. So notice that all of my winds are together. Those are colored one thing. All of my brass are together. Those are colored another color. All of the strings are together. And then there is a winds, brass, and strings channel. All of my, these are my group masters. All of my winds go to bus 1. This should go to bus 1. All of my winds go to bus 1. All of my brass goes to bus 2. All of my strings go to bus 3. Then my winds group gets bus 1. My brass group gets bus 2. My strings group gets bus 3. My reverb group gets bus 4. And then my bus 4 is sent from the sends. Your reverb is sent from the sends. The groups, bus 1, 2, and 3 are sent from the outputs. So make sure you set those up correctly. There is a channel EQ and a compressor on every channel. Those should all be bypassed. You can also bypass all of the contact instances. Oh, come on. You're not going to group bypass? Fine. Ugh. So, that should hopefully get you set up for this template session. Did I clear this one out? Yeah, clear that one. Take that one. Disarm this. I'll save it one more time. All right. I think that's everything from the production technique. I think I still had this. So create a new logic session, woodwinds, new tracks, names. And again, remember it says multi-timbral tracks, multi-timbral software instruments. Name the tracks, save the session, load contact, create piccolo multi, create piccolo instruments, piccolos, save piccolos as a multi, change the channel name, and then just keep going. You go through all the instruments. It's really the same process through each one of them. Building, building, building. Then it gets to creating the instrument groups, name the mixer channels, create 4 aux tracks, buses, load space designers, reset. Yeah, I think I said all this stuff. Okay. All right, that will wrap it up for the week 3 assignments. We do have one submission here, and we're going to take a listen to from Angry Bots. But I also want to bring up the, you've already gotten your production technique grade sheet back. All right, so your technical assignment here. Your technical assignment was doing all of the sound design for the 2D platformer. And here we have delivered, formatted, and appropriate. Delivered, number one, was whether the file actually exists, right? That's certainly has to be there to be graded. Number two was it actually contained the audio that it says it did. Is it correctly formatted? Correct sample rate, bit depth, names of the files. If anybody missed anything, it's most likely the names of the files. You just missed some small aspect of how the file was named, or the file just didn't exist entirely. That was typically what it is. Appropriate, I am very, very loose with the idea of what is appropriate because it's sound effects. It can just be all sorts of different ideas. I mean, an explosion should be an explosion. A voice like jump, ouch, or taunt should be a voice. A gunshot should be a gunshot. There are certain things that are like more concrete, but I typically leave it open to strong interpretation. And the production technique, this was your chiptune assignment. Lots of good things to listen to this round. Was the file named and set up correctly and delivered as MP3? Is it a correct length? Did you actually use the sounds? I don't think anybody skipped that part this time. Limit to 4 tracks, and then you have melodic lead. You changed the lead at some point. You used percussion, and you delivered a screenshot. The overall composition and mix, most people did quite well. Really, the focus of this beyond the composition is just staying within the limitations and the restrictions of this sort of format. So people did just fine on that. So that leaves us with the Angry Bots composition. Where is... You will receive the grade sheet back by the end of tomorrow for your Angry Bots composition, but this is kind of what we're looking for here. We have the ambient cues, a single ambient cue. We have the action cues for the buzzer bot, the spider bot, and the mech bot. And then we have 3 stinger cues. These are played along with the action cues. So the main thing that we're listening for with the week 2 Angry Bots composition is we're listening for a strong level and intensity difference between ambient and action. Ambient is at a lower intensity of instrumentation and composition and just strength overall. It is less, ambient is less than the action. So your action cues need to be your biggest and loudest and strongest cues, both instrumentation and composition wise. Ambient shouldn't mean boring or dull or slow or sparse or not much going on. Ambient cues can still have drums and rhythm and pace and intensity to it. Just however big and loud the ambient is, the action cues just need to be bigger and stronger. So we have proper formatting. That's kind of the basics that we're hitting on each time. Sample rate, bit depth, looping, or sample rate, bit depth, and number of channels and number of bars, like the length. Needed to be around a minute long. Appropriately atmospheric. It's a dark and gritty game. There's a lot. It's robots and fighting and all that stuff, so it needs to be intense and dark and strong and not too lighthearted or easygoing. Seamless looping. Certainly that's more of a technical thing. We want to make sure it loops just fine. And then there's development. This can be a challenge through the ambient cue because you don't want it just to sit in one place. You want some variation through the cue. Overall mix. It's the same thing in each one of these cues. Proper formatting, appropriate intensity. You're battling with the bots. You're fighting at this point. The action cue needs to be big and loud and strong. So does the music reflect that? And then we've got the seamless looping again and overall composition. Is it memorable? Is it strong? There's a strong melody. There's a good amount of intensity and pace. And then the stingers. Again, the stingers are sharp musical impacts. They hit really strongly and then get out of the way. They need to be unique and kind of hopefully tie in to the overall action and ambient cues. So we've got proper formatting, a strong impact at the front. Each one of them has a unique feel. They shouldn't be too repetitive, and they should fade to silence very quickly. They should hit and then get out of the way. All right, so we have a submission here. Here's our ambient loop. Looks like each one of these is nice and strong, so we got a good level off of those, and they look like they are set up to loop. The buzzer action cue is 8 bars. Actually, buzzer, mech, and spiders are all 8 bars. The stingers are a little bit, they're not as strong as the ambient and action, and they look like they kind of fade in, and they don't reach silence. They don't end or fade all the way out to silence. So that's just something visual to pay attention to, but let's take a look for how they actually sound. All right. So, a good pace overall. I like that there is still solid energy through the ambient loop. It's certainly not boring. It's got a pulse to it. There's a lead line. Maybe have some more change and difference between the different parts in the rhythm. Like the drum pattern and the chord progression feels quite similar, especially with those drum roll turnarounds. Doesn't need to change a whole bunch, but maybe the hi-hat takes a different pattern, maybe a switch up to another drum or another layer of percussion is introduced. I think it's really those snare patterns that really become obvious. Check the loop. Oops, well, I guess I should actually make it loop. That might help. And loop. Cool. Good stuff. Loops well. Set up to work. Good strength. The only another concern is that there's enough energy in the ambient loop that we need to make sure that the action cues are even bigger than that. So we want to also leave room for more energy through the action. Here's the buzzer cue. Cool, that works. Drums hit, definitely more energy. Change in the melody. Cool, good loop. Feels like the instruments all pause slightly. I'm missing my one. It kind of works. The only reason I point that out is because it makes the loop obvious. It's like, I'm looping. But now the other thing is that each cue needs to have its own kind of vibe or feel to it. Let's see. Good. This one looks, it's like hitting the compressor pretty hard. You might want to watch out for the overall levels. It just kind of flattens out here at the top. But it's hitting right up on 0. Also, watch that fade at the end. That one's a little even more obvious than the other one. But again, I like the different feel. I like the different lead melody, a little bit different rhythm. Let's try the spider cue. Cool. Again, a different voice, different lead line. Cool. Let's listen to stingers. Stinger one. All right, they're pretty, they got a lot going on. Like they're very, I want to say cacophonous, like lots of noises, and that's a little bit more defined, but this is like all over the place, and this is very dense overall. So you got to watch out. Some of those tones might clash because this is what's happening here. I'll just randomly put these. So you want to make sure they hit strongly right at the front, and this is probably not even going to be as smooth as it could be, but and then it just cuts off. So you got to watch out for that. Let's try this. This works a little bit better because it almost feels like in rhythm. Feels like it's got that dotted feel. This one feels like it would be very much out of tune with anything that's played against. Cool. All right, so good stuff from the ambient and the action cues. I like the energy from each one of them. I like the lead lines and the different, like I mentioned, the different voices that were coming from each of the lead melodies. Probably need some work on the stingers just to make sure they are going to fit against the action cues. They need to hit really strong, get out of the way, and you probably want to avoid strongly tonal phrases that aren't in the same key because it'll clash pretty heavily. All right. Good stuff to listen to. Lots to talk about this evening. Let's go ahead. I think that is everything from me. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them up. We'll stick around for a few minutes, but let's go ahead and wrap it up. I will cross my fingers about the first half of the archive. Hopefully that will show back up, but if not, I'll send out last week's archive to make up for it, to bridge that gap of 20 minutes or so. Okay, Michael, go ahead and ask your question. Michael, is there a way in Logic to just assign our Oxygen keyboard to MIDI channel 2 and maybe not at all? Hold on. Let me go to Logic here. You want to set your keyboard to MIDI channel 2, you need to do that in your keyboard. One thing about Logic is that it is going to accept MIDI from whatever channel you have selected and record armed. It's going to take every MIDI input ever and try to pipe it into that one track that you have. So no matter what interface it or whatever keyboard, if you had 3 keyboards hooked up to your computer, you record armed, all 3 of those would go into the same MIDI instrument. So, but if you want your keyboard to spit out MIDI channel 2, then that needs to be done from your keyboard. Let me know if that answers your question. So you have an MPC and you have your keyboard, and you want to have them play 2 separate things. It is not easy, but it is possible. And it is one of those things that I am a bit frustrated with Logic because it's not the most straightforward thing. If I go to, there's a couple of different things here. Yes, exactly. Michael, I have been playing all week trying to do this in Logic. It's easy to do in Pro Tools. You are having the exact same conversation that I have with my other, well, you guys had Professor McIntyre last month, and we have lovely conversations about DAWs, right? Everybody has their favorite DAW. Mine is not Logic. If I were to, when I do my own work, I work in Pro Tools and I work in Ableton because it works for the way my brain works. And other folks love Logic, and we have these wonderful. It's like arguing Ford and Chevy or Apple and PC or any of those fruitless arguments you have, or back and forths that you have. But here's my not so short answer to that. If I go to, where are my preferences? Here we go. Project settings. Project settings MIDI. Because, of course, there are multiple preferences. You'll hear me just throw Logic under the bus every once in a while because I love doing that. MIDI, no, recording. If you turn off auto demix by channel, if multi-track recording, will help this just a little bit, because if you have, let me just delete these, delete. If you have two software instruments, you cannot determine which port they get MIDI from. You can determine which output they go to, MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2. And if you, by default, where am I going? Go back here. By default, this is on. And when you do this, it automatically mixes all the channels together when you're doing this. So if you turn this off, then it will allow this one to get MIDI channel 1 and this one to get MIDI channel 2. But that is only the case when multiple recording tracks or multiple recording buttons are armed, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. So the real answer to this, and even more, is if you want to do anything inside of Logic that makes any sense anywhere other DAW, then you have to get into the fun environment window, which is the bowels of hell of Logic. So to do this, what you are going to do here is, here we have instrument 1 and instrument 2. And why are they layered over something else ridiculous? Oh, click, whatever, get out of the way, click. All right, so here's instrument 1 and instrument 2, and you want to do something really cool with two separate instruments on it. The way that you force this to work, and again, absolutely ridiculous, but you go to physical inputs. When you do physical inputs, it gives you this block with all of your MIDI ports on it. And then you can drag these ridiculously small little arrows into instrument 1 and instrument 2. Now those are different ports. If you want to get different channels off of those ports, then you have to go into new and do channel splitter, and then take whatever bus you want, whatever port, into channel splitter and go in, and then take channel 1 if you can actually see it and pull the right number off, and channel 2, and go like that. Then you should be able to set your different devices to MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2, and then it'll work. I think it works even without that record armed. Even then it might act a little weird on you, and it's not as painfully obvious as it is in other. Like, to me, you have inputs and outputs and sends. Whether it's an audio track or a MIDI track, I should be able to get whatever thing I want into that track and send it wherever I want to go, and be able to bus it across any other thing, right? And that is the routing. It comes from like my studio days where it's like my instrument keyboard is over here, and that is a physical connection to this box over here, and the outputs go into this console over here, and they are different things, and it doesn't do it automatically for me. Every once in a while, I call Logic a little bit of Fisher Price because it tries to do everything automatic for me, and it's not what I want. So there are good things and bad things, right? I will very quickly admit that Logic has amazing sounds, like the synths and the drum machines and the samplers and all that stuff has got access to amazing stuff, but routing it, a little bit different. So that should get you going. Give it a try, see how it works for you, and see that it actually is going to cooperate, because I had to do this for the way that I want to work. I want a MIDI track, I want an instrument track, I want an output track or a master or something like that, and a bounce track. And getting all that to happen in Logic is less than fun sometimes. So, all right, let me go ahead and wrap it up there. And yeah, I think that takes care of everything for our Tuesday night session. If you have any other questions, go ahead and post them up. But I will see you again on Thursday. All right? Thanks a lot.